The big bank bosses assure politicians that Australians aren't in too much mortgage stress. Domestic airfares dropped to their lowest level in a year, and how a productivity experiment in Japan led to a baby boom. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It's Friday, the 14th of July, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you've got a very interesting interview coming up. You are speaking with Lottie Takiri, former rugby league and union international, and now businessman. Would you say influencer?
I think we can call Lottie an influencer. Yeah, it's a bit of a different chat for us. Lottie is a co-founder of content marketing agency Huzu. His latest venture is Fan Stands, a platform offering discounts on different brands and services. The idea that you win VIP sporting experiences. So we just have a chat to Lottie about how his business life is going and life after football. A bit of a different take, but it's a Friday, Michael. Why not?
Yeah, it's a little bit different for us, but it is well worth a listen. It's coming up later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, on Wednesday, we had the bosses of NAB and ANZ in front of a parliamentary committee. Yesterday, it was the turn of Westpac and Commonwealth Bank, and all four have said rate rises are starting to hit consumers.
Sure did. Westpac boss Peter King said savings buffers that borrowers built up during the pandemic were starting to run down after 12 interest rate rises in 14 months. He expects the cost of living pressures will get harder from here. For now, King said credit quality remains sound and the level of stressed assets is at historical lows. There's been an increase in calls to customer care lines, but the number of active hardship cases hasn't yet increased, well, at least not significantly. He also added that the banking sector is the most competitive it's been in 30 years.
And what about Commonwealth Bank Chief Executive Matt Comyn? What did he have to say?
Well, he zoomed in ahead of Peter King yesterday morning. He said his bank is seeing most financial stress among people younger than 35 years and those who are renting. He said most of the younger people who bought their first house during the pandemic have reduced their spending by about 30%. However, the number of customers failing to make repayments remains low by historical standards. Comyn said the bank was making considerable progress on stopping scams, but more needs to be done, and he welcomed the government's new National Anti-Scams Centre. He believes some payments need to slow down to improve customer safety, basically. Comyn also defended the Commonwealth Bank's profitability as households find it harder with higher interest rates and inflation.
All right, so we've had all four big bank bosses now over the past few days speaking to Parliament. Overall, what have we found out?
The CEO has pretty much had the same message. Interest rates and cost of living pressures are starting to bite, but not too much. The number of people in mortgage stress thus far is relatively few. Younger customers and renters are finding it toughest. We also found out that there's still plenty of uncertainty around the economy and more rate rises are definitely possible. At least that's the view of the bank bosses. And the marketplace is very, very competitive. Now, that's not surprising given how many new entrants we've seen in recent years. Of course, that's good for customers, Michael, because it means we can and we should shop around.
Okay, how did local markets perform yesterday?
It was a great day, really, thanks to lower than expected inflation figures in the US. I'll tell you about that in a moment. The S&P ASX 200 closed up 1.6% to 7,247 points. Remember, a couple of days ago, we're at 3-month lows. Well, we're up about 3% since then. Plenty of movers among the large caps. Goodman Group jumped 4%. Rio Tinto was up 3%. Macquarie 2.6%. Wesfarmers was more than 2% higher. BHP, Commonwealth Bank, ANZ and Woolies were all about 1.5% better off. Some of the smaller caps, Biotech Imugene Limited, Gold Digger Perseus Mining and UK-based lender Virgin Money were among the best performers. In fact, the gold companies generally did really well yesterday. Evolution Mining, Regis Resources, Newcrest and Northern Star Resources, they were both up around 4%. The worst yesterday, at least among the top 200, was insurer QBE. It dropped 3%. Plenty going on in bond markets, Michael. Come on.
Look, I'm listening. I'm engaged. You say plenty going on in bond markets. And if you'd said that to Michael Thompson 12 months ago, he would have gone, oh, yeah, here we go. But now I understand the significance and the importance. And Sean, I'm all ears.
Excellent. So after the Reserve Bank Governor Phil Lowe's speech on Wednesday and the US inflation figures yesterday morning, markets have sort of taken a bit of a different view on prospects for interest rates. Really, they're starting to think that we're pretty much towards the end of the rate rise cycle. The 3-year bond rate fell 10 basis points to 4%. Now, remember, that's predicting what people think interest rates will be in the future. The cash rate is at 4.1%, so the 3-year bond rate has fallen 10 basis points to 4%. The market implied peak cash rate is now 4.4% by the year end. That suggests markets think there'll only be one more rate rise. Now, markets have priced in about a 50% chance of a rate rise in August and a 75% chance of an increase in September, but it is a real shift in momentum, definitely.
That's quite significant.
Sure is. And you want to know why?
Yes.
International markets, Margot.
Hang on, sorry. I realise now. I thought for a second you were about to ask me why, and I'm like, oh no, I've definitely missed something here. But I actually know. This is linked to what you said before about inflation data out of the US. Am I right?
Yes, core inflation in the United States is slowing, exactly what the Federal Reserve was hoping for when it lifted interest rates. In fact, annual inflation, that's the headline rate, fell to 3% in June from 4% in May. It was about 5% the month before. This is the full year to the end of those months. 3%, much lower than expectations. Core inflation, which removes food and energy prices, it's been much harder to reduce, but it's now at about 4.8%, down from 5.3%. While financial markets have still priced in one more interest rate hike in the US, most economists now think the rate cycle is close to over. Very, very significant. That's why we got the run on equities yesterday. It's also why the Aussie dollar did so well yesterday. It's back above 68 US cents. And just briefly, in China, exports and imports both shrank faster than expected last month, adding to growing trade pressures on the world's second largest economy. That's a new bad news part of the international market story. We can never, as economists, have pure good news. We've got to have a bit of bad news as well.
A lot of discussion about bonds and inflation and everything. I think I got through that relatively unscathed. I don't think I embarrassed myself.
Not at all. Well, you didn't speak, did you?
That was the point, and that's the
Right.
key. I figured out now if I just take a step back and just go, you know what, Sean, just go for it, then it reduces the likelihood of me saying something that's going to make me look a little bit silly. Anyway, there's plenty of time for that. We will see what we come up with. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, in politics, the Fadden by-election in Queensland will be held tomorrow, and opposition leader Peter Dutton has dismissed a Labor attack on the former member Stuart Robert.
There seems to be a distinct lack of interest in the by-election, Michael. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, and there were some terrific stats, alarming stats the other day from the AEC about how few people have taken part in early voting, and
Yes.
like down 25%, I think, on the voting at the federal election, and typically it reflects whatever the early voting proportion was from the federal election will carry over to the by-election. They're like, and they actually were worried enough to warn people, say, hey, don't forget, it's happening on Saturday.
Yeah, well, no one seems to care too much about it. The Liberal National Party holds the seat, obviously. It's got a margin of 10.6%, therefore it's expected to retain the seat. It's in the northern part of the Gold Coast, very sort of blue ribbon Liberal National Party. Of course, it was vacated by Robert's resignation in May. Gold Coast councillor Cameron Caldwell is the LNP candidate. Now, Labor has played up the fact that Robert was mentioned in the Robo-Debt Royal Commission report as having made misleading public comments about the unlawful scheme. Dutton yesterday said people didn't care about that. They were looking forward, not back. Maybe. Dutton also said that the Liberal Party takes responsibility for its failures in delivering the robo-debt scheme, though he stopped short of calling on former Prime Minister Scott Morrison to resign from Parliament. He said, in his words, it's Scott's decision to make.
All right. Now, Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles said NATO's decision not to extend membership to Ukraine is a matter for the military alliance rather than the Australian government.
NATO didn't provide Ukraine with a clear timeline for membership in the alliance at its summit in Lithuania this week, prompting criticism from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But Marles wouldn't be drawn on that decision. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is overseas, of course. A couple of images over the past couple of days, which I really enjoyed. Now, one was the hug between Zelensky and Albanese. I don't know whether you saw that, Michael. It was a really warm embrace. Probably Zelensky was happy that Australia had just added about $100 million in military aid to the Ukraine. That could have been it.
Yeah, that's worth a hug. I'd be hugging after that.
Yeah. The other one which I've loved in the last few days is the video doing the rounds of Albanese meeting Rishi Sunak, the United Kingdom Prime Minister. Have you seen that one?
I have, yes. Yeah, was that the one where they had the little signs as well?
Yes. They're discussing cricket, specifically what happened at Lord's. They were both very funny about it, actually. In fact, my 16-year-old sent me the video of it, and I think it's kind of good if my 16-year-old, it's all about cricket, right? So he's interested in the cricket part, but he's just suddenly taken an interest in Albanese and Sunak as a result of that, which I thought was pretty cool.
And suddenly got a teenager engaged in politics. Well played, Albo.
Yeah, well done.
And one more, Sean, the Australia-EU free trade deal is, if not dead, definitely on life support.
Yes, Agriculture Minister Murray Watt has pledged the government will do everything it can to achieve a better result from its negotiations for a free trade agreement with the European Union. Watt said it was disappointing Brussels had not agreed to Australia's requests for greater access for agricultural products to enter the bloc, given the demands were modelled on deals the EU had made with other countries.
Sean, Australia's richest couple, Nicola and Andrew Forrest, have separated, though most analysts don't think the split will make much of a difference to iron ore giant Fortescue Metals or their philanthropic foundation Minderoo.
The two have been married for 31 years. It follows recent transactions involving the ownership structure of the Forrest flagship company Tattarang and the shifting of shares into a company solely owned by Nicola Forrest. The two released a statement that said, and I quote, "After 31 years of marriage, we have made the decision to live apart. Our friendship and commitment to our family remains strong," end of quote. They went on to say that there's no impact on the operations control or direction of Fortescue, Minderoo or Tattarang. The couple have 3 adult children, Grace, Sophia and Sydney. It's understood they have no plans to divorce. It does mean, though, that Andrew Forrest goes from being the second richest Australian behind Gina Rinehart to about number 8.
Oh, there you go. Now, domestic airfares, Sean, have fallen to their lowest levels in a year, delivering a boost for travellers.
The Bureau of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Economics Real Domestic Airfare Index, it's quite the mouthful, shows the best discount airfare came in at 63.1 units compared to 70 in June and 61.1 in the same period last year. The result is significantly down from the 111.4 recorded in December 2022. Now, business class tickets were higher than a year ago at 56.8 compared to 50.9, but slightly lower than they were in June. While domestic travel is becoming more affordable for punters, the same can't be said for those heading overseas. Airfares remain significantly above pre-COVID levels. Meanwhile, while we're talking about airfares, less than 6 months after launching in Australia, low-cost carrier Bonza is acting 5 routes and cutting the frequency of many others in response to poor demand. The routes go from August 1. They include Sunshine to Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie and Tamworth, plus Cairns to Mackay and Toowoomba to Whitsundays. The cuts mean 22 routes will remain, some of which will see their schedules reduced from 3 to 2 flights a week.
Yeah, that's not a good sign after just 6 months. Now, the federal government is putting $70 million into Origin Energy's green hydrogen project in Newcastle, which would help cut emissions at Orica's manufacturing operations in New South Wales while also providing carbon-free fuel for buses and heavy trucks.
Quite exciting, this. The proposed Hunter Valley Hydrogen Hub, the full cost of which Origin has yet to reveal, will produce up to 5,500 tonnes a year of renewables-based hydrogen, according to a report in the Financial Review. Most of the fuel will be used in the ammonia and ammonium nitrate plant at the Kooragang Island owned by Orica, which is the world's largest explosives maker. The project, which was unveiled by Origin and Orica in February last year, will use a 55-megawatt electrolyser, more than 5 times bigger than the biggest currently committed in Australia. Now, the final investment decision hasn't yet been reached, but I love the idea of having a 55-megawatt electrolyser.
Do you know what an electrolyser does, Sean?
Well, I do. I had to look it up, though. So it's this apparatus that produces hydrogen through a chemical process, which through electrolysis. I can't say the word, Michael.
Electrolysis?
Electrolysis. It basically separates hydrogen and oxygen molecules.
I'm so disappointed. I really thought I'd caught you out there. I'm like, oh yeah, he won't know what a 55 megawatt electrolyser does. I've got him. No, fine.
You are consistent, so I knew that you would ask me, so I did look it up. I didn't know. I did have to look it up.
Well, and now we all know. Thank you for sharing your wisdom as always. International news time, Sean. The world's biggest global climate fund has made its largest bid yet to encourage private investors to spend money on water projects in countries hit by climate change.
The Green Climate Fund has contributed $235 million to a water reuse funding facility in South Africa. The water reuse program will be run by the state-owned Development Bank of South Africa, and it could attract for $1.5 billion, they reckon, in investment. Now, this South Korean-based Green Climate Fund has an aim to transform the water sector with a focus on wastewater from a predominantly public investment model to a private sector investment model. It's an interesting idea because eventually you do want private money funding these sorts of things. The investment highlights the increasing focus on water provision in increasingly arid countries, South Africa being one of them. It's the fifth driest nation in sub-Saharan Africa.
Remote work risks wiping $800 billion US or 1.2 trillion Aussie dollars from the value of office buildings in major cities. That's a huge number, really highlighting the potential losses that landlords are facing from post-pandemic changes in employment trends.
Yeah, so COVID-19's push towards hybrid work has driven the need for office space down, with vacancy rates rising. We know that story. McKinsey Global Institute said in a report that modelled the impact on valuations by 2030 in 9 cities globally that $800 billion in valuation losses could come through. It represents a 26% decline compared to levels in 2019. And it could actually be more. Now, some of the biggest falls in office space demand have occurred in San Francisco, New York City, followed by London and Munich.
And finally, Sean, one more. When one of Japan's largest companies set out 10 years ago to stop people working in the office late at night, it had a kind of a surprising result. There's been a baby boom among its employees.
Yes, the aptly named Itochu got a new CEO in 2010. He made improving productivity a top priority. So he took the unusual decision of banning people from working after 8 p.m. He said there'd be no more overtime pay. Those who were caught working late were told to go home, and they would get extra pay though if they came in early to get their work done. That was the plan. Perverse, really, but it worked. Today, profit per worker is 5 times higher than it was back in 2010. Now, part of that is high commodity prices and a weaker yen, but still, productivity has gone through the roof. There's also been an unexpected consequence, which is a jump in female employees taking maternity leave and then coming back to work. Itochu's fertility rate among full-time employees has doubled to 2, which is well above the national rate of about 1.3. Now, Japan has a massive problem with the ageing population. Maybe this is the solution, Michael.
Well, actually, maybe it is. And maybe a cheaper way to do it would be to encourage people to actually stay in the office after 8 p.m. and they just play Barry White.
That is obscure.
Don't you think?
I think the idea, I don't know where your mind is going here.
I think we know where my mind's going, Sean.
I think the idea is if you go home to your partners and, husbands and wives and things like that, you're going to have more babies than if you stay in the office the whole time.
Yeah, but a lot of relationships start in the office.
And probably should end there too, some of them. Anyway.
All right. Well, we're clearly not going to agree on this one. I think it's time to wrap things up, Sean, and promote our interview, which is coming up next with Lottie Takiri, former rugby league and union international, now businessman, influencer, man of many talents.
He is. We ask him what life after football's like, and we talk about his latest venture, Fan Stands, which, as he says, is giving the punter a fair crack at getting some pretty exciting opportunities. Very different, very Friday interview for us, I think.
Yeah, it is worth a listen. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, and don't miss tomorrow's weekend edition as well, where we'll be going head to head, Sean, to pick out the biggest story of the week and the favourite story and the sleeper story and the most remarkable. It's very competitive, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all about actually trying to make fun of Adam Lang.
Our adjudicator.
Really?
Yeah. Do not miss that. That's coming up tomorrow. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, Michael.
It's Friday, the 14th of July, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.